Risha Grant, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
I am so glad to be here. I've been excited for this.
Risha, I look forward to learning more from you. Love the title of your book, Be Better Than Your BS: How
Yeah.
Radical Acceptance Empowers Authenticity and Creates a Workplace Culture of Inclusion. But before we get to that, would love to know whereabouts you grew up and how your upbringing impacted the kind of person you've become, Risha.
Yes, I grew up in Oklahoma, still live in Oklahoma, born and bred, but I am from a small town of about 20,000 people. It's called Sapulpa. It can be tough for people to pronounce. And when I think about Sapulpa, I realize that out of those 20,000 people, I still probably grew up around not even 1,000 people because I grew up on what was called the black side of town. It was a very close-knit community of family and friends, people that I will know for my entire life. I grew up with my grandparents, and my mom had 8 siblings. So all of my cousins and extended family were a huge part of my life. It's something that when you're a kid and you get in your teenage years, you're not that proud of being from this small town, and you look around, I want to move to New York and LA and all these places. But as you get older, you realize that, man, this area puts so much into me. These people are cheering for me. I always have a home to go back to, people that care about me. And when I would do stupid stuff in my early 20s and teens, I would think about those people were going to be embarrassed in my family. So really close knit, but very religious. That part was a little difficult, very religious. My grandfather was a minister. And I'm telling you, every time the church doors opened, I was expected to be there all day on Sunday. There was Wednesday night prayer. There's Thursday night something, young people's night on Sunday night. So growing up in a very religious family, it presents a lot of difficulties for a lot of people. At the time, I just thought it was me and I was losing my mind there. But as I've gotten older, I realized that's been for a lot of people. A lot of good, a lot of bad, but I love it all.
You had that background, both the support and love of these folks that nurtured you, but also the limitations that some of their perspectives had placed on you. You also mentioned in the book the term biosphere. So, how were you able to break out of some of the thinking and some of the biases that had been placed on you?
My parents, because as religious as my grandparents were, and I guess it's important to say my mom was 16 when she had me, my dad was 20. So they were very young. And if there was a party happening in town, it was probably happening at my house. So my grandparents had us a lot because just didn't want us to be around anything that we shouldn't be around. And what happened is because they were so religious, we were in church all the time. But then my mom and dad, being as young as they were, they didn't make us like, they weren't just, you have to wear a dress, you cannot wear earrings, you cannot wear makeup. These are things that my grandparents are saying, but my parents didn't enforce that. And so I was able to really, in my opinion, become a very well-rounded person because I knew about God and God's very important to me, but I also knew that I could live my life and my mom would back me in that. And you mentioned the biosphere. I coined that term because these are the circles of influence that we are steeped in since birth, starting with our family and our friends. I like to look at it like we're born into this world with a clean slate. But as we encounter different people, they download onto that slate, onto your picture, basically. And so that's what happens with our families. They teach us. They teach us who we want to be around, who we don't want to be around, who we can love, who we can't love, what religion we need to practice. Like they teach us all of these things. And because we love them so much, and because they meet our needs and take care of us, we don't question it for a very long time. And then we go to school, and school teaches us about how we should be, what kind of citizens we should be, what the government allows, what the government doesn't allow. And it tells you the same thing, who's not normal in society. And then there's religion and there's media and there's all these things that keep downloading onto your screen. And before you know it, we become people that aren't thinking for ourselves, but we're taking what these institutions and what these people that we love, we're taking all that information and making it our own. And so we have to back up and make sure that what we're saying, what we're doing, how we're acting are things that we actually believe and things that we actually care about. I was able to break out of it because my mom was always that person saying, you want to do that, go do it. No, you don't have to dress like that. No, you don't have to do this. My mom, her faith is unwavering. There would be things I didn't understand where I would just say, because basketball is a big part of my life. I don't know how I left that out. I play basketball, I play Division I basketball. It's what I thought I would do with the whole rest of my life and what I was working toward. And I remember getting hurt. I had so many injuries, and my mom would just say, if you want to play, go play. And that's how she was about life. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know an entrepreneur. And she said, what do we need to do? I need this and this. And my mom would figure out, she'd co-sign on a loan, she'd do all these things. Even if I didn't have an example, she was that person saying, you can do it. If that's what you want to do, go do it. And so that's how I was able to break out of all of that.
It's wonderful that you had her support. So, how can we challenge our own thinking and this biosphere that you mentioned that has influenced us over the years in order to be able to see things differently?
I always ask myself, could my thinking be wrong? And the answer to that question is always yes. It could be wrong. And if I am open enough to say, okay, if I could be wrong, then let me go and figure out why I could be wrong. And even when I really think I'm right, when inherently I'm like, I am right about this, I try to challenge myself. So you've got to broaden your horizon. You've got to get around people or listen to people who don't think the way that you do. And so when you ask yourself, could my thinking be wrong? And just those two words, could be, yes. And so now that makes me go and really look at that total situation. Let me go see who else is saying something different about this. And I think if we would be more open to being wrong and to understanding that we can be wrong, then I think that a lot of the things that make our world a horrible place to be sometimes would at least simmer down. But some people refuse, absolutely refuse, even when the wrong is staring them in the face and you can see it, absolutely refuse to embrace it. And I don't want to be like that. I want to constantly say, could I be wrong about this? Am I willing to try to see your point of view? And that's a yes, always.
And that requires intellectual humility, Risha, which is very hard for us to maintain. Now, you also mentioned the BS in the title of your book. So, what is this BS that we need to be better than?
So it's the biosphere, it's our belief systems. It's what another term in my first book that I coined called bias synapse, which is our brain's role in unconscious bias. And then it's the bullshit. And to me, the bullshit part of it is you saying, no, there's no way I can be wrong. There's no other view that I need to take into consideration here. Everything that I think about this is correct. That's the bullshit part of it because we can all be wrong. We can all learn from each other. There's nobody on earth that I don't think I can learn anything from. And I'm really worried about where we're headed in the world right now. Because if you've been doing this 25 years like me, I starved, literally starved when I started a diversity communications firm in the state of Oklahoma. And so for 20 of those years, I couldn't even afford to put money in the meter outside my office sometimes. I can't tell you the number of boots I had on my car, parking tickets, and all of those things. And so as I spent all this time educating, and we hit 2020, and it was like, boom, this is happening. And I felt bad at first because I thought my phone is ringing because Black people are dying. That was hard for me to internalize. And then someone said, but you've been at this for 20 plus years. You put yourself in a place to be ready for this moment in time. And it really helped me to change my thinking about it. And I thought, well, look at all these companies for the first time ever interested in an inclusive workplace. I was excited. I thought, wow. And I worked with companies that were truly making some really tough decisions. Here we are 3 years later, and it's crazy to see the steps backwards that we're taking. It is something that I don't believe will be worked out in my lifetime. I don't believe it'll be worked out in the next few lifetimes, because people are going to have to be willing to say that I could be wrong in my thinking.
Part of what I love about your approach to it is that grace that we need to have. And you also mention we first need to examine our own roots. We need to then reach self acceptance before we can start accepting others. How can we go through that process? Because your focus is let's first work on ourselves before we start working on our teams or other individuals.
Yes, because think about when someone tries to tell you something about yourself and you know all of their dirt, right? You're like, are you seriously talking to me right now? And so I think a lot of times it's difficult for us to see other people out there living their lives freely. We want to reel them in because we've been reeled in. But I think that if you will just begin to really look deeply and become self-aware of who you are. It does not have to be this whole big thing. It could be something like, you know what, I wanted to really be a dancer, or I wanted to play sports, but my parents wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. Am I really being who I want to be to the world? And am I being who aligns with me internally? Because what you find out, like for me, with the whole thing of being in a relationship with a woman, being from a religious family, I thought for sure I'm going to hell. And what I realized all those years of lying to other people is they didn't matter. I was lying to myself. And when you lie to yourself, you can't feel good about anything that's going on. It's like it eats you up inside. So that was the first thing for me in dealing with my own bias. Is I had these biases against white people. And when you grow up and everybody around you is black, and you go to black church and all the stuff. Yes, I did interact with white people at school and in town, but I was taught as a way to protect me that I had to be careful because white people didn't like me. I couldn't play outside as much in the summers because they might not teach me the way they teach the other kids. They're going to think I stole my candy if I don't get a sack and a receipt. Grandma couldn't be a nurse, so she had to be a maid for a white family. The way I talk, the way I dress, all of these things are going to make these people not like me. Well, you get ahead of the game and say, guess what? I'm not going to like them either. I'm not going to like them first. And what I realized is that when I finally found out that I was being protected from white people, I thought, wow, I've never had a negative interaction with a white person in my life. I thought they were pretty cool people, but grandma, who I love more than anybody, said that they may hurt me. So these are things that follow you, because this happens as a really little kid. These things are going to follow me throughout my life. And when I get in the work world and I am meeting with people and trying to sell them on a business that they seemingly don't care about, I'm thinking it's because I'm black. Now, maybe it is, but I don't know that for sure. And when you walk into every meeting with these thoughts about people, your preconceived notions, because you have no way of knowing if these things are true. You walk in the meeting and there's a different tone to it that you're bringing in the room. And I think it's important that when I walk into a room, I want people to feel the warmth. I want them to feel like, wow, this person is a really cool person to be around. When you're walking into a room thinking these people hate me, they don't like me, they don't want to do business with me, I've already put that door up. And so when I started to think about how I thought about white people, and I thought they're thinking about me like this, and I'm thinking about them like that, there's no way. And so I started to ask myself questions. Why do you feel like that? What has happened in your life to make you feel like that? And that's when I got down to the nitty gritty of my grandmother, who would say things. And this woman grew up in 1921 Oklahoma. So those things were true for her. And she was trying to teach me how to navigate in a world that wasn't built for me. But those things lodge deeply within you. And you have to start pulling it out. Pull it out. Once you can accept yourself, let them do them. It's really, really pretty simple. Just let people do them. And you break down those barriers that are in your mind based on your biosphere and all the things that you've learned about them. And then you can even take that next step and in humanity, the world, it's self-acceptance, it's acceptance of others, and then it's acceptance of the world. Um, I don't think it's that hard. That's the thing about it. It's not that radical. It's really not that radical.
I love the perspective, Risha. There is so much in what you said. One element of it is the fact that oftentimes we rely on outdated maps and mental models of the world, whether it's grandparents or parents or other people's mental models. We navigate the world around us based on the mental models that have been passed on to us, not necessarily reflective of the way the world actually works.
Exactly.
However, what you're saying is we need to challenge ourselves. We need to challenge our own thinking. It is not an excuse that this map has been passed down by whoever. We all, first and foremost, need to challenge ourselves. And I love that in what you're mentioning and the examples you mentioned of yourself, because also for leaders, if you are willing to challenge your own thinking this way, then other people will be more willing to challenge their own thinking. So part of what I love about your approach, Risha, not a pointing the finger that you need to, it's I need to, and that I need to bring other people along as well. Now you also have a beautiful unique definition of radical acceptance. What is radical acceptance?
Including your own acceptance from the wellness world. And in the wellness world, it teaches you pain, right? How to tolerate it.
Risha, can I ask you to, uh, the connection went down for a minute. So
Ah,
it's okay. It's
yeah,
back
I'm
up.
hardwired, so that's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
weird.
No,
Okay.
no, no worries. Just start your answer from the beginning on radical acceptance.
Okay. Radical acceptance is the practice of welcoming and embracing humanity, including with no BS. It's pretty simple. Are familiar with radical acceptance from the wellness world. In the wellness world, it teaches you how to avoid pain or how to tolerate. But the radical acceptance that I teach teaches people how to prevent it. So that's the thing is we're each other. People are dealing with enough things in their lives and they don't need some outside person, a coworker or someone piling more on top of it. We just need to I think we need to show more kindness. I think we need to show more compassion. All of that happen to the least of us are eventually going to affect all of us. It's something that we've got to care about before it hits our front door. Because if you look at the stats, it's going to hit your front door. And so I just think it makes sense to figure it out for yourself and then see how you can extend it towards someone else.
When you do that, and I want to start reflecting a little bit more on what this means for leaders of teams and organizations. You also mentioned and talk about inclusion in the team and organization. And what I wonder is how do you balance that inclusion with constructive debate? Sometimes people avoid constructive debate with the excuse of inclusion. So, how can that be balanced, Risha, in your view?
That's a great question. Is balanced by the fact that if you're having the conversation, then maybe it really needs to be had. So one of the things that I am dealing with in my industry is DEI fatigue. We're tired of hearing about it. We're tired of having to deal with this. Well, what do you think about the people who are living it for their entire lives? You don't think they're tired of talking about it? You don't know DEI fatigue until you grow up a person of color or a person of LGBT or someone that's othered. They are tired on the level that that you probably will not understand. And so the balance me is we don't have to talk about these things if we actually take care of them. And we have created a culture where people can actually thrive, not survive, but actually thrive in this culture. If you hired me to be a salesperson, or you hired me as, or whatever it is, if I can show up and focus fully on that job every day, you are going to get the best of me. But what happens is we have cultures where there's completely disconnected. They're toxic. People are working a full suit of armor, trying to deflect the BS that's coming at them all day. Or they're trying to make sure that they speak correctly. They're making sure that their pronouns are in check. All of these things. By the time you get to actually focus on work, you probably put in about 2 hours of very, very silo work here and there. We don't want to work with each other and get together as a team. I don't like this person and I can't stand that person and this person makes me feel horrible. One of the things that I remember being the most surprised by when I really got into work and started speaking all over the world was how many adults tell me my manager does not smile. They do not speak. And I thought, wow, these are people 30 to 50 plus that are saying, nobody is kind to me. And when you are a manager and you walk in the office and you don't smile at your coworkers or at your employees or at your team, you don't say good morning, you don't ask how people are doing, they think they've done something wrong. So now they're walking eggshells and they have no idea why. Now, as you could be dealing with the other things that have nothing to do with that, but you're a manager, there is more expected of you. If you can walk in the room, one person I remember talking to, she used to work for Oprah Winfrey. She said the culture was amazing. Oprah would walk in and just say hi to everybody and ask them about themselves, all that stuff. And then she moves to a bank industry. She said, nobody speaks. And I'm thinking, if Oprah Winfrey can walk in here and say hello, surely my manager can do that. And it's something that I think that we have to remember. And it's something that always hits me hard because I'm from Oklahoma, and I'll tell you, we wave at the same person 10 times a day. If you sit on your porch and somebody drives by, it's just so when I travel to places where people aren't that friendly, always it hits me hard in my heart space because I don't meet strangers. I'm on an elevator. Hey, how's your day going? And people are looking at me like, is she truly talking to me? And I'm like, yeah, to you. How's it going? But an elevator is a great place to break down barriers because certain people get on the elevator and you just get in that corner and squeeze in real tight. And instead of doing that when someone makes me uncomfortable, I step out and I say, hi, how are you? How's your day going? 9 times out of 10, people are going to tell you they want to hear. In those 30 seconds that you spent on an elevator, you've now created a space where people are walking off of it feeling a little better than when they got on. I know that's not your responsibility, but it kind of is. So I believe that we have got to stop looking at it as it's somebody else's problem. It is all of our problem, and somebody that you love is going to deal with that problem one day. And hopefully it's not too late for you to make a change.
And that genuine humanity that you talk about, Risha, that it takes for each and every single one of us in our interactions with others, regardless of their labels, their titles, their outside shell, that really authenticity that create the workplace culture where people feel that sense of belonging. So it's not
Yes.
necessarily just doing this with people are of a certain background, ethnicity, gender identification, you name it. It's if you do this with everyone,
Yeah.
then that creates the kind of environment that we want in our definitely society and communities, but especially also in
Yeah. If we take away all the labels and just be people, just be people. I mean, I think that labels that we forget that we're dealing with another human being. And if you cannot see how you may be showing up to others, like you're losing a little bit of your own humanity every time you take the time to show kindness or show concern or compassion for somebody you probably past 10 years, and it's evident. I mean, I talk to people all the time that have worked together for 20 years, they have kids the same age, and they don't know anything about each other. And sat next to each other. And I'm the kid that needs to be split up because I'm going to ask you about your kids. I'm going to ask you about whatever I see on your desk. But I think it's easier for us to bounce ideas off of each other. I've heard for the past few years is tackle these tough conversations at work. Well, they're not that tough if you can establish trust, establish a culture where people can talk to each other, where people can talk about how things are affecting them. If you will listen to a coworker come in and maybe be able to talk about some of the things that are affecting them outside of work, you have more compassion for what's going on. You don't have to agree with it. There's a whole thing with Black Lives Matter, and as we got into police shootings and all of those things, people would tell me, well, it's not my fault, and I didn't have anything to do with it, and this person's coming into the office with an attitude. But if you can establish a space where people can, okay, let's have the conversation. What is going on? How are you feeling about this? I may not agree with it, but I can certainly have compassion for what you may be going through. I can have compassion for the fact that you have a son that age that you're worried about now. Um, I think that there are always things that we can find about each other to have compassion for or understanding about if we'll allow ourselves to open up to that.
Yeah, taking the time to uh, show that genuine interest and curiosity and finding other people's stories. And as you mentioned, Risha, connecting with their humanity
Yes.
is what matters most to every single one of us. And I think we will make progress when that's our thinking, regardless of whether the person is white, black, pink, purple, tall, short, whatever the case is. This is for everyone and will help all of us become better. Now, the other thing that you mentioned that I think is very relevant to the organizational context is the importance of feedback channels and then therefore psychological safety. So want to get your thoughts with respect to that. So one of the things that you've mentioned is we need to examine our roots and have that self-acceptance, which is really important. After that, we have to have that acceptance of others, which in part comes through that authentic connection to their humanity. But there are opportunities for the feedback and the challenging that is essential for psychological safety. It's not just asking questions and keeping our mouths shut. So, how can that be approached in organizations?
I think feedback is super important because even organizations that are very open, they seem to do a horrible job of once I report an issue, I have no idea what happened. It's like it goes into a black hole. And so I think that companies establish feedback channels where they can actually let that employee know. Now you can't, per employment law, you may not be able to talk about exactly what's going on, but even some balances of a system that says, hey, you reported this incident. I just want you to know that we are working what this looks like. Or maybe it is, are you comfortable for create a conversation between the two of you? Or if there's a power dynamic, because sometimes people have to report their managers or their supervisors or higher ups, and they feel very scared to do. Or I think HR or BI director or whoever that leadership is has to put things in place so that maybe you have the anonymity to go and report that, and they are handling it in a way that allows you to feel comfortable still working under that person while it's being worked out. There are companies who have 800 numbers that you can call and create complaints. The only problem with that is it's hard for them to really trace exactly who's being affected because people are not leaving even their names. So I think it's super important that there is something in place that will allow an employee to know that if I report this incident, I'm going to be protected. And you can do that through policy. Have an anti-retaliation policy, have a zero tolerance policy. These policies are to make sure that if there's retaliation, that person is gone. If that person falls outside of whatever these rules that are put in place, there's zero tolerance for that. That person is, I think it's really, really important for an employee to understand that there's in place to protect them so that they don't have to work in an environment that is toxic. Feedback channels are extremely important. But I can't tell you how many companies don't enforce them. People that, I mean, there's probably not been one time that I've spoken to a large group that someone hasn't pulled me to the side in the hallway and told me the most horrendous stories about, I tried to report this, I tried to do that, this is what happened to me. I'm scared, I hate going to work. I mean, I hear this stuff so often, and this can be a company that, on the surface, I mean, they really are trying, but it only takes one supervisor to make a whole team feel like, they're scared and they don't have anybody protecting them. So it's super important that leadership is focusing in on these feedback channels and making sure that employees know that, hey, if you can't talk to this person, here's that person. If you can't talk to that person, here's that person. Because you want the most. People are the heartbeat of the company. If the heart's not beating, that dies. So you've got to make sure that your people are comfortable.
That feedback is essential. And I know you mentioned this as well, that I think it's also critical for there to be transparency. There are
Yeah.
times when the leaders in the organization can't talk about something. Transparency to the fact that they can't or why not is important. And I
Mhm.
find in most instances, a lot of people I interact with, Risha, are well intentioned, but they don't make the effort to communicate with transparency, to give that feedback. And therefore, that doesn't create the kind of environment people feel there is that sense of belonging and they have the right culture. Now, another thing with respect to the well-intentioned leaders, I
Yeah.
know all of my podcast listeners believe in this. That's part of the reason they listen to this podcast, that I have conversations with and authors like yourself. And the vast majority of the business leaders I interact with, Visha, would 100% agree all the statements you've made up to this point. So I would love to know from experience, what are some of the common DEI mistakes you've seen leaders with good intentions make? Because we have a lot of people with good intentions, but
Yeah.
we're still not making as much progress as we should. So
Yeah.
what do those of us who have intentions need to consider doing differently? What are some things you've seen folks with good intentions not get right?
The main thing is they don't listen. They just don't listen. It is always a situation where they feel like they already know it. One thing that has been consistent throughout my entire career is that there's a difference in the way the leadership sees the company and employees see the company. I mean, totally different. It's like somebody's wearing blinders, completely different. And so I think those well-intentioned people, I used to hear, was that the road to hell is paved good intention, right? And there's a whole thing around intent versus impact. You can intend to your intent to say something, to do something can be great, but if the impact falls short, that your intent doesn't matter. So it's really, really important that you are creating an impact. And when you don't listen, I think it's the most difficult thing, when people tell me I have reported this and I've said this and I've gone to all of these people, and the first thing from leadership is, well, are you sure that that's the way the person meant it? Or are you sure that's what happened? You completely invalidate that experience. And what I can tell DEI space is that if a person goes to leadership, trust me when I tell you, they have talked to everybody in their network first. They have relayed the entire story because they want to make sure that by the time they actually have the courage to take it to leadership, that it is foolproof, that nothing be in it that they're saying. And the first thing you say is, are you sure they meant it like that? That invalidates the entire thing. So I always tell leadership, listen, validate, and act. None of this means with it. None of it means that you're not going to do a thorough investigation. But I can completely listen to you and trust you to be able to know how you're being treated and to know your experience and understand your experience. I can listen to that. I can validate and say, I am sorry that that happened. I'm going to take all this information and I am going to figure out what's next. We will need to talk to this person, but you're acting. Because here's the thing, people that fall into a diverse category, we've been telling stories for years, you know, that stories are not important, action is. And so when you get to that action part, it does not always mean we need to fire somebody. It means we need to talk to that person. We need to understand both sides of the story, and then maybe we need to bring both of you in to have a conversation so that we can try to figure out something that works for everybody. You have to listen, validate, and act. And I believe when at least you're thinking in terms of those three things, you can put something in place. The other thing they don't do is talk to people. I don't care what kind of program you have at work, the people that it is affect, you truly need to talk to. You know, I'm sure you've heard this 100 times, thousands, millions of times. Leadership introduces some new product or some new something that the people on the front line have to sell or do customer service for, and they give you all this feedback like, everybody says the product sucks. Everybody's cursing me out every day. This is what's wrong. And if you never make those changes, pretty soon you don't have a company. The thing is not selling. So talk to the people that are on the front line so that you can truly understand that about this. You've got to rely on your people. And if they figure out that you really don't care what they have to say, they're going to stop talking.
I
So
love I love the way you put it, Risha. Listen, validate, and act. And that listening, validate, and acting relies on what you mentioned before it, which is the humility to assume you don't know and we don't have it right, as
yes.
opposed to assuming we've got it right, it's all set. So now you've given a lot of great thoughts to leaders listening to this conversation. I'm curious, in addition to your own book, Risha, are there resources or practices you typically find yourself recommending as people want to move beyond the intentions? And I wholeheartedly with you. The intentions can be positive, they can still have extremely negative consequences. So the actions are important. Are there any or resources you typically find yourself recommending for leaders who want to have more positive action and more positive results?
One of the things I recommend is doing a BS check. And that BS check says, I am going to go and talk to, have coffee with, I always recommend something like coffee or tea, something that's about 20 minutes because, you know, lunch could be a long time and you might find that you really don't want to be around them or dinner. But you can have coffee in the morning, 20, 30 minutes, and just talk to your people, talk to people that maybe make, I tell people in the companies all the time, because you're actually taking on a DEI initiative, you can say, hey, we're doing this at work. I need to learn things. And so I love to have a cup of coffee. You can do the same. It shows that they are humble. It shows that they do have humility to say, hey, what is going on at your level? And I am talking entry level. I am talk to the clean people. I mean, and find out how they're being, how are they being treated at this company. They're your biggest ambassadors. Every time they leave that building, they're going to talk about how great or how horrible this company is. So the fact that the CEO or the VPs are scheduling coffee with me, the college graduate who's, you know, been here all of a year, who's cleaning the bathroom, speaks volumes. So do a BS check because you don't know, and I liken it to when I played sports and when I coached. You know, I would tell a player to go out. Why can't you drive down the middle? I don't understand why not do that, coach. I cannot do it. You know, there's a girl standing there. She's, you know, 7 foot tall. I'm 5'1", and you keep trying to send that player in. And then when you have practice and you tell me what happened, and they set it up for you, you're like, that's on me, my fault. You know, I should have listened to you. I should have come up with a different play. That's why, to me, you got to have that captain on the floor, because the captain on the floor is saying that play is not going to work. I know coach keeps calling it, but the play, and so we are going to have to modify that play, and that is what's happening at work. sometimes we have to modify the play because you're asking people to go out here and do something that they can't do and have not. I think that's why that show Undercover Boss is so great. Some things that they've established at this very high level that the people in the store cannot do, and it's like the first thing they say, wow, this totally does not work. And if you look back, I mean, 100 employees have said this does not work. Sometimes the coach has, and that's what a BS check is. It is getting on the floor. It is understanding who your people are, how your books may be affecting people, and the changes you make so you can win. The other thing I suggest is self-educating. Forget what mom said, forget what grandma said, saying those aren't great stories and that there aren't things that you can't learn from them. But if you've learned something negative about an entire group of people, you don't have the excuse had back in the day, where you have to find, shows or books or what have you on certain things. There is something out there. The media is so segmented. I mean, you can pretty much find anything. And I think, there's so many resources in my book of things to watch and websites and streaming services and all of these things that I'm still, frankly, catching up on some of them. But the things that I have this difficult time with, I learn that life or that style or whatever it is, and I throw away everything that I've heard. Actually, go learn or go meet a person that represents that community. I think we could all get out of our box a little bit and go have dinner in a community different from yours, or go take your kids to a playground where there are a lot of kids that don't look like them. When people see what it feels like to be a minority, it helps them to recognize when they're not, how maybe that person is feeling. So sometimes the coach has to get on the floor, and that's the biggest thing I could recommend, along with all of the many resources of shows and streaming services and things that we can truly learn about it too.
What outstanding recommendations. Get on the floor and listen without the biases of already knowing the answers. One of the things that sometimes I have to work with executives on is that our minds work very quickly and
Yes.
we think a lot faster than even people speak. And in most instances, we already know the answer they are going to
Yes.
give. And part of what I have to tell them is, even if you know exactly what they're going to say, take a deep breath, fully focus and listen. And that's really, really hard to do in
Yes.
order for us to understand. But on the floor, watching the play, being involved, being curious help. As learning ourselves, including through your book, Risha, how can the audience find out more about you, your resources, and your book?
All on social media. For the book, go to Amazon, Be Better Than Your BS. If you want to connect with me, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, any of them, LinkedIn more than anything is where I'm focused. But I'd love to talk to people. I love to hear what people are dealing with. And so I'm always open like that. If you email me, you most likely get an email back. So I'd love to hear from you.
Well, I appreciate you helping us be better than our BS, Risha, and most especially with the fact that you yourself talk about how you have worked and continue to work on this yourself. So it's
Yes.
not a pinnacle of a mountain any of us reach. We have to constantly challenge ourselves and our thinking. And I really appreciate the frameworks and the approaches and the examples you have laid out in your book. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation, Risha Grant.
Thank you. This was great.